It's Friday night, so that means it's Nick at Nighttime. We're going to go over the non-spoiler reviews of the books that came out on August 18th, 2021. Lots of books to go through right now, so let's get into it. Welcome back, everyone. So, Nick at Night, the non-spoilery review, kind of like a discussion show, right? I'm going to go over the books that we got on August 18th, 2021. Lots of good stuff to go through. Let's start off with the big two, as always. We're going to go into Marvel first. This is Moon Knight number 2, Jed MacKay. So, I didn't know much about the character when I first started reading issue number 1. So it was a good jumping on point. They did a lot of good things in that book, like kind of catch up on what this character is all about. But I think this book kind of struggles with, it does a little bit better job of explaining kind of the abilities of the character, right? So if you don't really know who Moon Knight is, this one kind of enhances his mental abilities in a way. It kind of shows you how mentally strong and how, maybe how vast his power is. It's not necessarily an action-packed book, but it kind of explains a little bit more about his mental state. And so he kind of fights a villain that has some kind of mind control powers. And so he kind of turns the tables on him a little bit and kind of shows him how crazy his mind is, how crazy Moon Knight's mind is. The art is still really good. Moon Knight still he's still portrayed as this like glowy white figure among the other kind of duller colors around him. It was still interesting. I think he still kind of suffers from finding his voice, though. He's kind of like, he's a jokey character. He's a serious character. I don't know. It's kind of like a mixed personality, which is kind of who Moon Knight is anyways. But I felt myself not really being able to connect with him. The art is okay. The villain in this one is kind of lame, I think. I think they just kind of used him just because they wanted to showcase how deep Moon Knight is mentally. I don't know. Or how crazy he is. I don't know. I didn't really understand the vision that he kind of used towards this bad guy. And it didn't really do it for me. I don't know. I'm kind of on the edge. I think I'm going to keep reading it. But the first 2 issues really haven't blown me away yet. So let me know what you guys think. Moving on to Kang the Conqueror. This is issue number 1. Everyone's jumping on the Kang train because he was in Loki. And so everyone's excited for a new Kang the Conqueror book. And so his origin story is actually very, very complicated, in my opinion. You can search on YouTube, who is Kang the Conqueror or Kang the Conqueror Origins. I'm sure Comics Explained or Variant Comics has something on that. But this was an interesting book, at least from an art perspective. But this is kind of a retelling of the, not a retelling of the origin, but perhaps a way that we can learn about how these different versions of Kang come to be. And so that was kind of interesting. But they kind of played with the character a little bit in ways I didn't really appreciate. He was less of like a deity kind of character and more of just like a pushy father figure in a way. You know what I mean? And so I think the art was really, really cool. I think the kid character was interesting inside this book. And I think, what kind of happens throughout the issue here was interesting, at least the story they were telling. But this wasn't the Kang book that I was expecting. It wasn't the Kang book at all that I was expecting. So, if this book has one thing going for it, it's the art. And it's kind of this kid character figuring things out, but this wasn't a really flattering Kang book, in my opinion. So, I don't know. Wasn't impressed with that book. What'd you guys think of Kang? Not entirely sure. Moving over to Trials of Magneto. This is number 1. Got the Peach Momoko cover because I actually like this one with Scarlet Witch on it. So this book was interesting. I just came off of House of X, Powers of X. So Hickman's run is real fresh in my mind right now. I have this like pristine vision of Krakoa, the mutant island that they're on, or the mutant area that they're on. And so everyone's kind of getting along. Everyone's celebrating at the end of that issue. And I haven't read any of the X-Men leading up to, the new revamp, the new number 1 and number 2 that came out by Duggan and Planet Size X-Men. So I'm a little bit behind. And I don't quite know if maybe what happens in this book is kind of the outcome of what's been brewing over the last 21 issues or so. But essentially, the book is called The Trial of Magneto. So Magneto is on trial, spoiler, and in every single cover practically has Scarlet Witch on it. Why? Why is she draped over in his arms, presumably dead inside that on every single cover? That's not a spoiler. It's just, stating the obvious there. So we have a book called Trials of Magneto, and we have a presumed dead Scarlet Witch. So put 2 and 2 together there. So, but, why would he do that? Did he do that? How are the other mutants going to respond? That's not part of the code, the mutant code. That's like one of the 3 laws they set up in the beginning, right? If I'm not mistaken, from Hickman's run. So it's an interesting collaboration from the different teams to kind of solve what happened. And I think that's pretty cool. And we get like the council kind of getting together and figuring out what they're going to do. And Magneto's kind of pissed, right? And so is this kind of the undoing of Krakoa? Is this kind of how it's going to end? I don't know. We'll figure it out. That's it for Marvel. Just a few Marvel books. Going over to DC, we have several books from DC. We have Nightwing. This is issue number 83. What a great run. Tom Taylor's doing this one right here. This one was okay. We get a little bit of action towards the beginning, and we get some cool, interesting cameos from a lot of other characters. Teen Titans. We get some Superman action in here a little bit. Just kind of cameos here and there, just kind of setting up what he's going to be doing with his inheritance that he got from Alfred, right? So he's trying to figure out, what the right thing is. He kind of consults all of his best friends growing up, and they all kind of agree that, hey, that's a really noble idea. That's a really noble plan. And so he kind of goes out there and the objective here is, or the question here rather, is, what are all the villains in Gotham and the surrounding areas think about what he's going to be doing with his money? And so, they have plans to kind of rule everything. And so this guy's really kind of putting a wrench in all their plans. So he's probably going to become public enemy number 1 pretty soon amongst all the villains, right? So we'll see what happens. Nightwing number 83. Great Nightwing run. This book was okay. It was on the weaker side of the recent Nightwing books, in my opinion, but not bad. One book that kind of redeemed itself from the week before, I think. Catwoman number 34. This is Rom V. Gorgeous Jenny Frison cover right here. The last issue of Catwoman was really anticlimactic. It was this Father Valley Catwoman battle, and he really got the upper hand on her. Of course, he's been, trained in fighting and whatnot. But Catwoman's no pushover, clearly, because they spent the last several issues beefing her up as far as her reputation, her abilities, everything else like that. And the first time they meet, he gets the upper hand super quickly, and like the battle's presumably over until she gets rescued, which was kind of a bummer. This is round 2. Round 2 is very different. It's really interesting to see how she learns how to adapt her fighting style, based on how he's attacking her and whatnot. There's a cool little like side detective story as well. And there's really cool paneling and just creative little backup plans that they both kind of throw out there. Father Valley and Catwoman, if things don't go their way, they kind of have these little outs, which is really, really interesting. And so it's an amazing just issue long battle between the two of them. So it was really, really cool to see that kind of play out. And the end is a little bit open-ended right now, and there's some little interesting cliffhangers in it. This book really kind of picked it up from the last issue. So if you didn't enjoy number 33, perhaps you'll like 34 even more, like I did. So we're going to be moving on to the last DC book, and it's probably one of my favorite books of the week. This was that Mac cover. This is Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow issue number 3. So Supergirl, another character that I don't know much about, but I'm absolutely loving this run. So I hear a lot of people talking about it's very wordy. There's a lot of narration. There's a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of just kind of like mundane recounts of just ordinary things that happen, right? They're kind of traveling. Her and her companion here are traveling, trying to find the guy that killed this girl's father, right? And so they've been traveling. The last issue was a big travel montage, practically, with all the kind of things that happen when one travels. People sleeping on your shoulder unintentionally and then getting grumpy that you call them out on it, things like that, right? So this one, they kind of arrived at their destination. They're hunting down this killer. They're interacting with the townsfolk, and there's this weird, like, animosity, right? There's this weird kind of like a racial thing, kind of like right underneath the surface. If you pry a little bit, the native people in the area get really, really upset with you. Well, Supergirl kind of uncovers the dark history of this town, of this planet, perhaps, and realizes that the guy that they've been hunting this whole time really kind of collaborated with some evil people and did some atrocities, just some genocidal acts on this planet, right before they got there. So, it kind of reinforces how bad this guy is. It's a weird way to beef up a villain to make him, even more villainous in a way. We don't even see this guy. He basically showed up in the first couple panels of issue number 1. We get a couple panels of him hugging and hanging out with some bad people in this issue, but we don't really have any more dialogue from him. We really don't have any more, an understanding of who this character is or why he is the way he is, right? So I can see the criticism from a villain perspective that the villain is kind of weak, and this is mostly just a story about Supergirl and the girl she's with. I can't remember her name from the issue, but just the two of them trying to hunt it down and trying to understand where they are and getting along with the people that they're kind of surrounded with at the moment, while they're hunting this guy down. So I can see that criticism for sure, but I'm having a blast reading this story because it's really kind of fun to see these two people interact. So Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, number 3, not a bad read at all. All right, moving over to some independent books. Got a stack of them here. Going to probably my pick of the week, which is Eat the Rich. Jenny Frizen cover again. She's killing it this week. She's got Catwoman. She's got Eat the Rich. This is by Sarah Gailey, and so this book was really remarkable. So essentially, you have a book called Eat the Rich. So you could there's cannibalism implied, right? So no spoilers there. But essentially, it's a story about this young girl and this guy are traveling to his parents' house. They're dating. She's gonna meet the family for the first time. This family is extremely well off. They have this gigantic beach house. They're millionaires. They have all these things. They have like servants in the house. They call them the help. All this stuff, and so they're throwing like this big gigantic retirement party for one of the groundskeepers or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. There's a lot of weird interactions with our main character here and the help in the area or on the property, and so we get some pretty crazy revelations in here, and then we get a really shocking ending and kind of a cliffhanger at the end. But essentially, the whole story is about her just perceiving everything that's messed up about this family and the friends and the party they're throwing, and nothing really makes sense because she's kind of coming from a different world. She's lower class. She's in this high class party, and she kind of brushes all the weirdness off as that's the difference, and that's why she feels weird. But no, there's clearly some dark shit going on here, and so we find out a little bit more about that and how twisted and messed up all this is. And so we get some pretty crazy revelations toward the end. Eat the Rich, highly worth it. Pick it up. It's a great book. Hollow Heart, number 6. This is on the backlog right now. I have to read all the rest of the books first to get caught up on that one. So we'll cover that one at a different time. Second Chances. This is another number 1 from Image Comics. I think this book suffers from many plot lines all kind of starting at once. You really have a story about... There's a kind of like a guy who's got like a company, let's just say, called Second Chances, right? He's kind of like call me if you need to fake your death and I'll set you up with a new life and cash in your health insurance and make sure your family gets it and get you kind of settled, right? Well, he's got some old friends that are really, he's got one old friend in particular who he doesn't really like to mess with because the guy's a little bit unstable. And so he gets kind of wrapped up into that guy's mess. And also, his daughter and things like that. And so, his daughter kind of uncovers, the friend's daughter kind of uncovers these deep, dark secrets. And some people don't like that. And so they're kind of after her. Now they're after this other guy. And so it kind of suffers from a little bit of confusion, a little bit of, hey, I think this is going to be a book about this guy offering second chances to people. And it's like, well, nope, never mind. It's about these like assassins that come in and take people out. It's like, well, no, it's not about that. It's about this one girl uncovering her father's secret and secret business, maybe. It's like, well, no, maybe it's not about that. Now there's like a serial killer in this house. It suffers from a lot of different things happening in one issue. And, I think they could have slowed down issue number 1 and focused on 2 less stories or plot lines. And I think this would have been just fine. Maybe issue number 2 will clear it up. I don't know. I think the art was interesting. It's all black and white. And there's tons of action and it's gory. And it's neat. It's neat art. But, we'll see. We'll see what issue number 2 has. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see if I'm going to pick it up. Going on to Radiant Black, Kyle Higgins. This is issue number 7. I love that black and I like that white background cover. And then, of course, on the other side, you have the pink, radiant pink, I guess, cover girl kind of just prominent right there. So Radiant Black is doing some pretty interesting stuff, in my opinion. So if you're like a fan of like kind of Power Rangers or anything like that, I think you're going to really enjoy this book. The first few issues, this book is unrecognizable right now at issue number 7. The first 4 issues, even halfway through the 5th issue, perhaps, if you read those and then flipped into this book, it's a completely different book. So you have these people who are powered by these black holes, and they kind of assume the color of, a different color, right? So we have a black, a yellow, a red, and a pink. They all have different kind of power sets. They all met in their own unique ways. They thought they were the only ones. They come together, and then they find out that there's this guy that kind of like somewhat looks like them, but he's an evil guy with like swords, and he kind of glitches out and can teleport and stuff. And he's there to kill them. He's there to steal their powers, right? And so it's just a story of all our characters on the cover here kind of banding together. They don't quite trust each other yet because they were kind of fighting in the beginning. They didn't know who each other were. They were just kind of people with powers, and all of a sudden there's somebody else with powers, and there's a conflict. So they're trying to learn how to trust each other, trying to figure out what the other one's motives are, and they're having to deal with this guy trying to kill him for a reason that they don't even understand. So it was really, really cool. And some of the battles in here, it's just drawn super well with the coloring and everything. Really, really, really liked it. So Radiant Black is a book that if you read it for the first 3 or 4 issues and you didn't quite like it, issue 5, 6, and 7 are just totally different books. So keep reading it. I'd say keep reading it. It's a book that's, again, there's no other better way to say it. It's a book that's unrecognizable at issue 7 compared to like issue 2 and 3. So it's pretty fun. Man, onto a book that's really fun. This is Scott Snyder's Nocterra number 6. So Nocterra, this has always been a fun book. Scott Snyder does a lot of interesting things. He constantly goes back to the beginning of the big PM, they call it, right? So it's the day the earth went black, essentially. And, the chaos that ensued, right? So he's constantly going back there with our main character and her brother and just kind of reliving small little moments. And then those little moments have a lesson that they learn. They result in some kind of lesson learned, right? And that lesson learned, they can always apply to the current situation. So it's an interesting way of going back and just kind of revisiting and retelling the story from the beginning, and then being able to pull that knowledge into the future and then applying it. But, he does it a lot, though. I feel like that's a technique that you can only use, every so often, every couple issues maybe. It feels like he's doing this in every issue. So that technique is getting a little bit old, in my opinion, but it is a creative way of kind of explaining the beginnings or explaining the origins a little bit more. But I think we're past that. I think we don't really need to know too much more about how this all started. We've had 6 issues of, little snippets of how this whole thing started. So essentially we find out that, our safe haven from the monsters, from the blackness, this is supposed to be like the Eden of the area, right? Is actually the leader of this thing is actually in cahoots with Blacktop Bill, who's the main villain in this book that we are aware of so far. And so there's lots of trust issues, obviously. So kind of all hell breaks loose. It is a big escape issue. We get some Blacktop Bill action in here for once, finally. And then we get some amazing chase scenes in this book too. If you enjoyed the chase issue, this is another version of that kind of a thing. And then at the end, we get like this introduction to this really amazing character who is on the cover of like the B or C cover. And she's just, so far, she's just like a badass. And we get a little bit of an understanding about who this person is and how she kind of saved our heroes in the very, very beginning too. So maybe this is like a long-standing friend that they haven't seen in forever, but it was a pretty cool little introduction in like a real badass kind of way. So it was fun. It's kind of like a mixture between, an escape and chase movie, right? So Nocterra, rather, is a pretty good book. I really recommend it. All right, few more books left. We're going to go into the last Image book. This is Man-Eaters the Cursed. This is number 2. And I'll tell you why I really, really like this book. So I don't know anything about Man-Eaters. Didn't read volume 1. Don't know what it's about. I've seen some of the covers. I can make some assumptions. But this book started off really cool. Basically, there was a story about this girl. She was, she's like a preteen or something like that. She was going to go off to craft camp. And so the way they describe it is girls go to craft camp, boys go to football camp. The boys that go to football camp tend to get hurt, whatever. This one boy got hurt a whole lot year after year after year. He wasn't allowed to go anymore. He's got concussions. He's got a bad knee or leg or something like that. He had to go to craft camp. So he's like the only boy, I think, or one of the only boys there. Completely unprepared. Didn't read the manuals. He's there. All the kids kind of show up to this island for craft camp. This one veteran girl who we're kind of following this whole time, she's been around. She knows what to do. Presumably she was in the previous volumes and things like that and kind of like knows what's going on right now. Anyways, they wake up the next morning and they're the only 2 kids that are remaining and they don't know where the other kids went. So they kind of have to figure this out. There's a lot of like evil stuff going on in this island. There's a lot of like spirits perhaps, or ghosts or some kind of crazy stuff going on. So our main character, she's really trying to figure out, the implication here is that, there's a lot of different ways or reasons why these kids are going missing. And she's kind of aware of a lot of them, but she still needs to figure out why. And this poor boy, he has no idea what's going on. And so we kind of learn in this issue that craft camp refers to witchcraft camp, essentially. And so she kind of like, oh yeah, didn't you read the manual? Didn't you think about this and this and this? And so it's like, yeah, all the girls do this. This is what girls do. And so I really kind of like that, that play on the word. And so it was really, really, really kind of fun. And how, the art is really, really interesting. I think it works really well. I like the sense of humor. I like the dialogue that their characters have. I like how clueless the boy is in like a non-irritating way, but like in a, well, yeah, that's probably how it would happen kind of a way. And I like how kind of self-assured the girl is in this book. I'm really enjoying this book. Way more than I thought I would. And the next issue has like, it would appear like a bunch of Girl Scouts on it, but they're all wearing like green witch hats and stuff like that. So it really kind of plays on that whole witchcraft aspect to it. So I'm loving Man-Eaters the Cursed, which I never thought I would for whatever reason. Whatever preconceived notions that I had about what this story could be about. Really, really, really enjoying it. So check it out, man. I would highly recommend it. Got 2 books left. 2 books. They're both Aftershocks books. We're going into Beyond the Breach, Ed Brierson, issue number 2. Man, this book. How do I even describe it? So the first one basically was about this girl. She was kind of her boyfriend was cheating on her with her own sister or something like that. Mom is sick, whatever, and she's dumping the boyfriend and everything, and she's kind of like high on whatever emotion she's on at the moment. And then she gets in a car accident. And when she comes to, the world's kind of been invaded by these aliens. They're just ripping people apart. It's the most gory thing you've ever seen, right? In comic books lately. So, it's kind of her trying to survive, make sense of all this. She rescues a boy. She kind of finds this little guy who reminds me of like the Ewoks from Star Wars. So basically it's the 3 of them just trying to survive with these monsters terrorizing this little area that they're in. So this book here, we get a little bit more expansion on the different monsters that are around. We meet some more interesting allies that may have come from the same place that these monsters came from. So, we have some team up stuff here. Of course, we run back into some other humans and there's a bunch of conflict because everyone's on edge, man. The whole world presumably has gotten invaded by these aliens. And so it's like, who do you trust? It's just kind of like a shoot first and ask questions later kind of a scenario. And then we get, some more alien, wherever these aliens came from, we get some more like bounty hunter type characters involved here too. So this book really reminds me of Oblivion's Song in a way, right? We have like these different dimensions kind of overlapping. We have this whole community of people and monsters and civilizations from the other side kind of merging into this other world. And they have to kind of coexist somehow, right? And so I don't really understand Now that I don't understand, I really don't know if I like where this book is going. I'll keep reading it because it's Ed Brierson and I really, really enjoyed the work. And I do enjoy the art and I think it's interesting, but I don't quite know if I like it yet. I think I enjoyed issue number 1, but it seemed a little bit shallow. It seemed like the monsters weren't scary enough. They were clearly scary to the characters because the characters were absolutely freaking out and they had good reason to be based on how the monsters were tearing everybody apart. But I feel like it has like this layer of like childish kind of feel to it that really doesn't do it for me like a book like Something's Killing the Children might have, right? Something's Killing the Children is a very similar book. There's monsters terrorizing people and there's people who fight them. So, we can compare them at that level, right? As soon as you go any more high resolution than that, you lose the whole thing, right? But, that book at least has a good scary element to it. And this book takes that scary element and removes it and kind of adds a comedic tone on top of it in a way. Not in the dialogue, but just in the way that it's drawn, the art style, and some of the characters that are involved in here. So, I don't know. We'll keep reading it. We'll keep reading it and see where it goes. But we're going on to the last one. This is Peter Milligan. This is God of Tremors, that extra large one-shot book here. So didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. It's first off, it's a square bound book. It's Aftershock. It's card stock and everything. So it's going to be a pain in the ass to kind of store this book. I have to keep it with my trades. I didn't like it. Gods of Tremors. So if you look at the cover, and if you're familiar with like Family Tree, right? Family Tree was a really, really interesting story. I think it was Jeff Lemire. Ended a couple months ago, I think. It was 12-issue run. It has the same art style, right? Like this cover, because it looks like there's a bunch of woods and vines and stuff like attacking this kid. And then you read this solicitation. It talks about like demonic worship and epilepsy and a tale of exorcism. But then they throw this 19th century goth horror stuff on top of it. So it's very like repressed Christian-y kind of a thing. This kid has epilepsy and it's misdiagnosed by his father, who's just kind of like trying to exorcise him all the time, exorcise the demons, you know what I mean? And so then, you do that enough and this kid's like losing his mind in a way. And he's kind of come across another source of maybe where these tremors might be coming from, right? There's this other god out there and he calls himself the God of Tremors. And so it's really kind of a confusing book because really it's a boy with epilepsy and his father's misdiagnosing him and he thinks it's the devil. He's trying to beat him out of him. But then this kid, I don't know if he's either hallucinating or something, but something gets him. Some kind of spirit, some kind of god gets him and tries to, pull him in his direction. And, when people start finding out what's kind of going on, bad stuff happens. And so, I didn't really enjoy this book. First off, I don't like the 19th century time period in books. And I don't like the fact that it's an extra long issue and we spend most of the time just watching the father just beat the kid for having epilepsy. So that's kind of a pain. That's kind of a bummer. And then we get this God of Tremors reveal in here and he doesn't really even do anything. That person's kind of boring. And the supporting cast around him, the mom's trying to help. The staff is really, annoying and abusive as well. And so, I don't know. I think the art was really, really cool, but it's just your typical 19th century cliche crap, right? Nobody understands mental illness. The women are stupid and they shouldn't have opinions. The man is overbearing and has his own demons and he's trying to work with it and won't understand no matter how much his son's trying to help him or trying to convince him that, something's going on. And then, people get what they deserve at the end, right? So I don't know. I think it was predictable and kind of boring. I don't know. That's what I thought about Gods of Tremor. So what was your favorite books of the week, man? We had a lot of cool stuff. I'm going to tell you what. Some of my favorite books, Man-Eaters, The Cursed, number 2. What a great book that was. I would say that's a great like mid-tier book. So it's really, really decent. So if I had to pick, 4, 5, 6 books, I'd definitely be getting Man-Eaters. I'd be getting Radiant Black. I'd be getting Nocterra. Eat the Rich is probably my number 1 book this week. Supergirl. Catwoman wasn't bad. Nightwing wasn't bad. Trials of Magneto wasn't bad, especially if you're like the Hickman stuff. I'm not saying that the writers like Hickman. I'm just saying that it's in that same world, and it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of, where they go from there. Kang was okay. Moon Knight was okay. Nightwing was okay. Catwoman was good. So yeah, if I had to just pick a few books, if you can just go out and get 4 or 5 books, I would definitely get Eat the Rich, Trials of Magneto, Supergirl, Nocterra, Radiant Black, and Man-Eaters, The Cursed, issue number 2. Let me know in the comments below what you picked up, what you thought your pick of the week was. What was your top 3 or 4 or 5 books? If you can only pick a few books, what would you get this past week? So let me know in the comments below. While you're down there, like, subscribe, hit the bell notification for future videos, share with a friend, do all that good stuff. Really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed Nick at Night. We'll see you in the comments.